Good evening. My name is Diane Rosenberg, and I'm the Executive Director of Jefferson County Farmers and Neighbors, JFAN. I want to welcome you to tonight's JFAN annual meeting, Leaving CAFOs Behind, Diverse Opportunities for Independent Family Farms. We have a terrific meeting with a great lineup of speakers, and I'm so glad you could be with us tonight. For those who are not familiar with JFAN, we're a nonprofit community organization. We've been around since 2005, 19 years now, and we work to protect Jefferson County from CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, also called factory farms. We are not anti-agriculture, far from it. We support and advocate for traditional independent livestock farming that enables more farmers to be on the land practicing responsible, respectful, and regenerative agriculture. Our farming families here tonight, Tim, Deleana, and Curt Roseland, and Tana Faaborg, made conscious decisions to leave industrial hog farming behind in two very different ways, and I'm so pleased that they've agreed to be with us tonight and sharing their stories. So I have a few brief announcements before we begin. Excuse me. Last week, I attended the Industrial Farm Animal Production, the Environment, and Public Health Conference in Des Moines. The meeting launched a new book of the same name, and it was 2 days of excellent presentations, one of the best conferences I've ever attended. The panels contained an excellent lineup of speakers that brought to life the public health harms of factory farms. Senator Cory Booker and Eric Schlosser were keynotes, and former Senator Tom Harkin kicked off the conference with his opening remarks, during which he called for a course change in how we practice agriculture in Iowa. And I couldn't agree with him more. I encourage you to view the recordings. They're posted on the Harkin Institute's YouTube channel, and we're putting the links in the chat for you now, as well as a link for purchasing the book. Now, over the years, many of you have heard Dr. John Eichert speaking about our fundamental right to clean air and water. So now I want to draw your attention to a constitutional amendment proposed by Driftless Water Defenders Jim LaRue and Dr. Chris Jones that would guarantee the fundamental right of Iowans to have access to clean air and clean water. They published an op-ed in Sunday's Des Moines Register that includes the language that they proposed, and we'll drop that link in the chat as well. Now, this seems particularly timely as a new Food and Water Watch report, Factory Farm Nation 2024 edition, finds Iowa produces the most factory farm waste in the entire country, a whopping 109 billion pounds of livestock waste every year. That's 25 times the amount of the state's human waste, and our water and our air suffers as a result. So with the upcoming election, I encourage you to ask all Iowa candidates, if elected, will you support an amendment to Iowa's Constitution that recognizes citizens' fundamental right to access clean water and clean air? It would seem like a bipartisan no-brainer, but with the hold that agribusiness has on the Iowa State Legislature, we will need to advocate hard for this amendment. My last announcement is the Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture, IRA, will be hosting a meeting in Iowa City called Factory Farms, Your Health, and the Cancer Connection on Wednesday, November 13th at 7 p.m. at the Iowa City Public Library. Dr. Chris Jones will headline this meeting, and it will also include experts in public health, including Audrey von Tron-Lam at the University of Northern Iowa, and Mary Jo Faaborg, a dietitian who focuses on agriculture and public health. The meeting will also be available via Zoom, and we'll send out announcements with more information soon. Now, as we begin our meeting, I want to acknowledge some of our corporate sponsors for this meeting. They are local businesses who value and support JFAN's work to protect Jefferson County from factory farms. We have 3 gold sponsors this year: Aeron Lifestyle Technology, Radiance Dairy, and Vastu Partners. I want to thank each one for their generous support of JFAN. They helped to make this meeting possible, and they helped to make the work that JFAN does possible as well. Okay, now we're going to first start with presentations by all our speakers, and then by the end, we'll have a question and answer session so you can ask your questions to any of our speakers tonight. Please put all your questions in the Q&A box, only, and not the chat, because I want to be able to see your questions and we want to go through as many as we can. So I'm very happy to introduce our first speakers, Tim, Deleana, and Curt Roseland from Marshall County. Tim is a third-generation farmer, and even as a teenager, he knew he wanted to farm his whole life. In 1977, when he was only 16, Tim convinced his father to build one of the first CAFOs in Iowa. Tim and Deleana realized in the late 1990s that operating a CAFO was no longer sustainable for their family, and they started to look for other options that would better suit what they wanted to achieve. Niman Ranch was a good fit. They converted their farm in the early 2000s, and they've been successfully raising hogs for Niman Ranch now for 18 years. The family is able to fully support themselves farming for Niman, and their son Curt joined them a few years ago after a 3-year stint in the Army. The Roselands are part of Niman's ambassador program, and they have a really interesting story to tell that they're going to share with us tonight. So Tim, Deleana, Curt, thank you so much for being with us and being part of this meeting tonight.
Thank you, Diane. I'm Deleana Roseland.
I'm Tim. I'm Curt.
And we are the Roseland Family Farm. My husband, Tim, like Diane said, is a third-generation farmer. His grandpa established our farm in the early 1900s. And at the age of 16, that was in the 70s when everything was going big. The mantra really in farming was go big or go home. And Tim asked his dad to partner with him and start a consolidation farm in order for them to have a long-term farming family. Tim and I met in 1991 on a ski trip in Colorado, and we are definitely living proof that God has a sense of humor to place a Dallas diva on a pig farm in Iowa. But here we are, and 33 years later, we are still farming. I worked off the farm for the early years really to support our farm. We had a 200 head sow operation, farrow to finish. And through those years, we went through a lot of the commodity market volatility, increased farmland prices, and the overall instability of just our type of farming. In 1998, the market hit an all-time low, and the farmer was receiving 8 cents a pound for their pork. And even though we were able to weather that storm, it became extremely apparent that we were not going to be able to have that be something that would be sustainable to grow a family on. So we began the process of deciding what life was going to look like. Tim evaluated a lot of different options as far as off the farm jobs, what could he do at other farming operations. And in the early 2000s, we just really were at an impasse. And in 2004, Niman Ranch was actively recruiting farmers to move into partnership with them. And so we attended one of their quarterly meetings that they would have throughout the state. And to our surprise, they were very welcoming to a confinement farm. They had very strict standards, but they had great ways for a confinement farm or any farm with buildings to be able to adjust and adapt their operation and still meet the Niman standards. So we were super hopeful at that. We were able to tour quite a few Niman farms. And while ours was a purely financial decision at the time, we really, as we grew into the family, realized how important their philosophy really was. But we were super thankful we did not have to ditch all the investment we had already made. So Tim began the process of selling off our current herd and making all the necessary changes to make our operation fit the Niman way. We could have never imagined the impact this would have on our family. We really went all in. As a matter of fact, we pulled our youngest two children, Curt and his sister, out of public school and homeschooled them. And that gave us the opportunity to fully integrate them into our farm operation. So really at a very early age, Curt was integrated into the farm. Now we started with Niman as a farrow to finish operation, just like we were in confinement. But after Curt and Lori moved off the farm and went to college, went to the military, we found ourselves, it's a lot more labor intensive. And so at that time, Niman was making a opportunity for wean to finish pigs. And so that was a beautiful way for us to move into that operation. And that's what we're doing now. So Tim's going to share a little bit about our transition, some of our challenges, some of our, a lot of the reasons that have ended up being good. Then Curt's going to talk a little bit about how he desired to come back to the farm and why, and what he sees as his future. And then I'll wrap this up a little bit at the end.
All right. As Deleana was saying, the main beginning reason, or the main reason we went with Niman was financial. Just wanted a stable market, to get paid a decent market value for the hogs we raised, and Niman definitely, provided that. Yeah, we had other issues too with the confinements. We're always battling health issues, and that was usually we fed a lot of drugs. I mean, most confinements do to keep the hogs healthy. And then I grew up with it, so you don't notice the smell and the dust till you get away from it. And once we switched, that was the biggest thing you noticed. A total different smell, and the dust was gone, and just so much better working environment. Like I say, when you grow up doing that, you don't, that's just the norm, so you don't even think much about it. But and then the manure, I was all set up. All liquid manure tanks, all that, and I was concerned about switching all over to dry manure. But I still had some dry manure because we started out with I had four hoop buildings before I ever joined Niman, so I was familiar with the dry bedding and manure, dry manure, and so that wasn't totally new to me. But I guess you switch that.
No, okay.
Yeah, the initial investment, I thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was, but honestly, the initial investment was not that terrible because use my own labor, a lot of used equipment. There was had to pour some concrete, but no, the initial investment was not terrible, but a lot of time.
Ready?
Yeah. This is what our farm looked like in 2005, right when we're ready the time we switched over to Niman. That's one of the few pictures we had of the inside of their farrowing confinement building. And Yeah, the smell in there it was very ammonia, strong smelling. And this is the construction underway. They tore out the concrete pin dividers, put in some walls to make smaller rooms, and then this is a room that was going to be farrowing, and that's the bottom picture. There's a couple of farrowing pens. I mean, they're not completely finished, but that's kind of the start of it. And that's the outside of that same building. We had to cut the concrete to make doors so we could, one, get the skid loader in and out, and two, so the sows and pigs could all go, have outside access and get in and out. And then that's the same building after it was done with the sows and their pens and outside area so they could go in and out as they wanted. And you can see the top left picture there, that's the door. In the wintertime, you close it up solid with a rubber flap, and then in the summer, you open that completely up, and then anytime you need to get in with the skid loader, clean out, that was the access. That's just a view from the inside looking out in the summertime when the big doors open and all the ventilation doors are open. There's no mechanical ventilation, just all natural air. And then this is another building. This is a finishing building. And that you can see all I don't know what, it's been so long ago, I have to look now. There was 18 pens in the room. And when I was done, I made it into two separate rooms, two big separate open rooms. And that's that same building with as we're filling in the pits and making the outside access and then that's that same building when it was done. And that building we used as a lactation nursery. We put the sows and the pigs in there after when the pigs were, I believe, 3 weeks old. And I think 10 to 12 sows and all their pigs in one room together. And then the white gates in the top left corner, those gates are up off the ground. That was a creep area for the pigs so they could get away from the mothers and have their safe place to lay down, and also feeding water for the little pigs. Oh, the environment inside there is just day and night difference between when it was a confinement. The bedding just took out all the ammonia smell. I mean, it just fresh air in there when you went in. And two, part of it was that they weren't, a fraction of the pigs were in there compared to before. They had a lot more room, they could spread out, and like I say, that the biggest difference was the air quality in and out of the building. I mean,
Yeah, we actually have a neighbor that was directly west of this building, and he wasn't too sure he really wanted us to go to this route because he complained about the smell of our farm the way it was. And he kept thinking, wow, if you have them outside, it's going to smell even worse. But he really was one of our best advocates in the years after to say, what a difference in smell. It just smelled, he was a cattle farmer, so he wasn't opposed to a smell, but it just a different smell. So it really did make good relationships with our neighbors too.
and this is gestation hoop that I built in 2006. Actually, I built two of them just to meet the Niman standards of room for the sows. But I always had pen gestation for my sows. I've never had never had gestation crates, so that was not an issue for me. Putting sows in a big group in a pen was not a problem, but I just needed more room for the sows and bedded area. In the confinement I had before, no, I did not have room for any of that. Then this is one of the finishing hoops. And like I said, I put up 4 of them before I ever became a Niman farmer, so they work great. The air quality in them is, amazingly good. There's no mechanical ventilation, no fans running or anything, and then the left picture, you can see there's an outside alley that makes all the hoops join. And that's in the summertime, we put sprinklers out there to keep them cool. And right now we have 9 hoop buildings like that. There's 3 rows of 3. And I don't know, that worked really good for us.
Well, I decided I'm gonna talk about just being a young farmer with Niman. I decided to come back out of the Army mostly just because I wanted to farm, but at the time it just wasn't a reality for me. I didn't think looking at commodity prices on anything for young guys. So when I was getting out, I called Dad and told him I was going to get a job in town and save up my money, and hopefully in 10 years I could buy in. And he called Niman and they offered for us to expand the wean to finish operation and for me to buy my own pigs and start farming, which worked out really good for me because pigs cash flow quickly, and it takes less capital investment for a young guy, which is both the things that I needed. I felt comfortable doing that with Niman just because my family had a long history with them. I've seen Niman grow. I've seen Niman go through hard times with their farmers, and Niman stood by their farmers, not just their own interest. And so that was really important to me. And so I guess just in the future with Niman, all I see is I'm continuing to chase down the regenerative route, trying to get our farm as self-sustaining as possible. I'd like to get to the point where we're producing all of our feed, and then we're producing all of our fuel as well. Niman's been really good at helping me with this. They've given me a grant for a composting system to compost our manure using aerated static pile composting rather than turning it. It's giving us really, really good quality compost and making it easier to spread, reduces the smell as well of the compost. So, and then as well as I'm working on a project with a soybean crush mill to start making my own soy oil diesel as well. And so Niman's just a really good partner with all of that, as far as I'm able to make these investments now and know that I'm going to get my money back from them with a stable market. And that's really why I'd encourage other young farmers to look into Niman. Is I actually own my pigs. I'm not a contract farmer, so I get the equity out of them, but they give me a guaranteed stable market. So the bank's willing to lend to me when I didn't have deep pockets. And so that's really big when you're my age and have as little money as I did. So they've really been good to me and to our family.
Okay, so to wrap up, I was just going to talk quickly a little bit about some of the initial challenges we had. Was the thought of having to keep records and forecasting to a company. But Niman has field agents that cover their farmers, and they're really your go-to person between you and the company. They keep constant contact with you and help you overcome any obstacles you have. We definitely had to adjust to new protocols, how we fed, how we handled, how we addressed our health of the pigs. And we were very lucky. Once again, the Niman field agent worked with us, but also we had to have a client vet relationship. And Niman just is fantastic about helping their farmers with any issues they have. And then, some of the financial challenges that we've had during transition. But once again, Niman has all different types of programs to help their farm families. It's been a good sustainable income for us. We've made it through the 2008 financial crisis. Anytime we've had substantially increases in our inputs like corn costs, soybean costs, Niman doesn't leave us with the bag for all of that. When we were commodity farming, that was just our problem. But with Niman, they adjust our floor, even though they don't have to. We're in a contract, but they know that it's important to keep their farmers in good financial health. In 2018 and also 2020 derecho, we had substantial farm damage. They came alongside us, helped us in any way possible through partnerships, through financing, through helping us get our pigs off the farm in a more timely manner. And during 2020 COVID, Niman did not ever have to not take our hogs. We never had to euthanize our pigs like some of the other operations did, because their facility never did shut down. They've been able to keep us independent, whether we were weaned to finish or farrow to finish. They've created a lot of pride in our family. One of the reasons why we're an ambassador for them, we often go out and visit with customers, or we'll go to conferences and all, just tell our story so that people can actually talk to a farmer who's been with them for a good amount of time and can really speak to how our family has benefited through our relationship. And then once a year, they do an annual farmer appreciation dinner where all the farm families are invited to Des Moines. They fly in chefs from all over the country, and they provide an absolutely 5-star meal for us, but we get to actually see how the chefs are producing our product and what it looks like to their end users. And that's just been a fantastic thing to raise pride in ourselves, but for us to see who our customers are. And then obviously, like Curt talked about, the young farmer initiatives. So I think that's all we've had for you today. Thank you for your time.
Tim, Deleana, and Curt, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this. It's really encouraging to see how Niman supports you as traditional independent farmers. And it's really encouraging to see how you were able to make that transition. And I hope this inspires some farmers that may be considering a CAFO to follow in your footsteps, because this is a much better option than running a CAFO. Deleana, when we talked earlier today, you said you raise about 7,500 hogs a year in three different rotations. So that means you've got about 2,500 hogs at a time on your farm. So I just want people that are listening tonight to look at the difference, because many of these CAFOs that we see around the Iowa landscape are 2,500 head CAFOs, and there's a lot of hogs packed into one building, where you've got, it sounded like what, like 9, 12 buildings, where the hogs are allowed to move around and go out and get fresh air and just be in a very a much better environment than the hogs that are in CAFOs. And not only is it better for them, but it's better for you physically. It's better for your neighbors physically and your quality of life. So I think it's very inspiring to see that there are other options besides raising that number of hogs in a CAFO. So thank you for sharing all of that tonight.
Yep, thank you.
So I want to next introduce Ron Mardesen. I just met Ron last week at the conference in Des Moines. Ron is a Niman Ranch farmer as well, and he's a mentor and spokesperson for the organization. He's a fifth-generation farmer in Cass County in southwest Iowa, and he's raised hogs for Niman since 2002. So Ron was a field agent for Niman for over a decade. He's been supporting hundreds of independent family farmers before moving to his current position as mentor and spokesperson. His farm, A-Frame Acres, has been featured on 60 Minutes, CNBC, in the Associated Press, and in many other publications, and also in ads for Chipotle and ButcherBox. So Ron has hosted hundreds of guests on his farm. He's a mentor to beginning and young farmers throughout the Midwest as well. So Ron is going to speak on an economic impact analysis that Iowa State University conducted in 2019 on the economic contribution of Niman Ranch farmers in Iowa. And he's also going to share how his community was hollowed out by the incursion of CAFOs over these last several decades. So Ron, thank you for being part of this meeting tonight, and I welcome you to share your story with us.
Well, thank you, Diane. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Am I the only one that is excited or find it refreshing that the Roselands are managing to not only survive but thrive in Iowa, the way the weather is right now, the way the climate is, the way the environment is right now? So I can digress a little bit. I remember when Tim and Deleana first started to become Niman Ranch farmers. That was in 2005, 2006. I was a field agent at the time. And the ideas they had, the enthusiasm they had, and the energy that they brought to the program was refreshing at the time. But you've heard them say a lot of good things about Niman Ranch, and Niman Ranch is and of itself is unique and special, and it has created a space where a void used to be. I mean, in Iowa, as CAFOs have got bigger and larger and become the dominant theme, it's nice and it's refreshing to find people that draw a line in the sand and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to become factory farmers. And the Roselands fall into just exactly what 195 other farmers in Iowa like them believe. What you'll see here are pictures of home. This is a home place in southwest Iowa. The upper right hand or the upper left hand corner, excuse me, is where the farm is. There's 3 hoop buildings, a gestation barn, and then we pasture farrow. We use A-frames and we farrow in the spring and the fall. The lower left hand corner then, of course, is a picture of mamas and babies out in the pasture, which is the way I firmly believe pigs are supposed to be raised. And then, of course, the picture on the right are the 3 generations that are still working the farm. We're lucky enough that 5 of us, 5 generations have worked the farm, and I feel fortunate enough to say that I've intimately known 4 of the 5. My 3 children are in that picture, and my wife Denise is in that picture, but my mom is also in that picture. And I feel fortunate that mom's going to be 85 in a couple days, and she is still very active on the farm. So I can count my blessings that she's there. Let's go to this. This is what I wanted to talk about. This is the crux of what I've seen. This scares me. This is Iowa's raising more pigs on fewer, bigger farms. This is a study that came out recently. And if you look over on the left side, you'll see that like in 1987, there were over 36,000 farms that were raising pigs. And here we are, we flash forward to 2022, and guess what? There's less than right at 5,000 that are doing that. In other words, that's a 86% decrease in the number of hog farmers. What I like to tell folks is if you would take me and 9 of my best friends in 1985, 86, 87, or whatever that raised pigs, and you stood us up in a line, and then you had everybody that is raising pigs today continue to stand up there, I'd be the only one standing there. And that's horrible. That's sad. You know, we've heard comments about how that we're worried about the EATS Act is going to hurt individual small independent family farmers. Well, you know what? I think that boat has already sailed, guys. The small independent family farmers have already been hurt. That's a lame duck cry, if you will. But while the number of pig farmers has dropped, the amount of pigs that we're raising per farm has skyrocketed. And this is what we're dealing with in Iowa. And part of the reason we can do that, and part of what they've got, or part of how they can get that accomplished, is with the confined animal feeding operations, or the factory farms, or the CAFOs. Well, what exactly did that do? How has that benefited, or how has that hurt Iowa? I can remember when I was a small boy, there were vibrant communities of 400 or 500 people, and each one of those had 1 or 2 grocery stores. They had 2 or 3 churches. They had a couple gas stations. They had a couple bars. They had a vet that worked there. They had a feed store that worked there. They had schools. They were viable economic places. Well, then all of a sudden, as agriculture got bigger, as the intensity became for more and more larger confinement operations, we began to see this stuff disappear. As the number of farms faded, as the number of farms went away, the number of kids that were going to be there to go to school, the number of families that needed groceries began to disappear and dwindle too. And consequently, we lost the small rural vitality that we were so proud of. In 2019, Dave Swenson, who is an economist for Iowa State University, put an impact study together. And he says, and you can read here, he says, local economies would prosper if more adopted Niman Ranch's approach instead of conventional production. What is Niman Ranch's approach? Niman Ranch's approach is to raising animals a more natural, a more holistic way, a more traditional way. And the key to that, the reason that that works so much better is because Niman Ranch and the way we care for livestock requires more energy, requires more labor, requires more thought, more animal husbandry skills, if you will. And Niman Ranch generates, we found this out, Dave put these numbers together. Niman Ranch generates 50% more economic value for the local economies than the conventional industry does per 100,000 pigs. Now, what does that mean? Well, in layman's terms, that says that if you raise 100,000 pigs and you do it with the modern conventional system, you're going to generate roughly about $36 million of revenue. If you're going to raise that same 100,000 pigs, you're going to do it in the Niman system, you're going to generate nearly $60 million worth of revenue. Now you'll say, now, wait a minute, Ron, how can that be? Well, quite honestly, is the more people you have, the more revenue you're going to have to generate. And the more revenue you're going to have to generate, the more local economies there are going to be that are going to be stirred up. You're going to have folks that are going to buy local. You're going to have folks that are going to live local. You're going to have folks that are going to need to do business local. Keeping the smaller farms viable, keeping the animal agriculture more traditional as we have had it in the past is more successful. And at the end run, at the end of the day, what happens is your rural economies will not only survive, but they will also thrive. So I've run through that pretty fast, but they told me to keep it to 5 minutes, so I did. Thank you much.
Thank you, Ron. That's really like I said before, the constitutional amendment is a no-brainer. This just seems like a no-brainer to me too. You know, raising hogs, any kind of livestock in this manner is so much more productive for the Iowa economy. And, you know, I will hope that there will be more opportunities for more young farmers to get involved with Niman, you know, listening to Curt's experiences, listening to Deleana's and Tim's story. I'm really hoping that that will bring more interest to raising hogs rather than going the route of a CAFO, because it contributes so much more to the economy and it contributes so much more to the community.
And I know this is off topic a little bit, but the thing that's nice about it is raising pigs these more traditional ways doesn't require near the investment that putting up $1.5 million CAFO does. I mean, if you're not afraid of a little sweat equity, if you're not afraid of putting your hands on a 5-gallon bucket or on a scoop shovel, the opportunity is there. And for young kids that aren't afraid to work, aren't afraid to think outside the box, I think the opportunity is just unbelievable. Well, Curt's just an example. I mean, the average age of a farmer in Iowa is 60 years old.
Yeah.
The average age of a kid that wants to raise pigs in the Niman Ranch system, or the average age of a Niman Ranch farmer, is 43 because of the opportunity, because of the hope, because of the thought that, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe there's some way to bring the next generation in. Maybe there's some way to turn this mess around.
Yes. And we have to turn this mess around because otherwise this mess is going to turn us around. So thank you. Thank you very much, Ron, for sharing tonight. Can you just one more minute talk a little bit about how your community was hollowed out, over the years that you've
Sure,
been there?
sure. I'd be glad to. Elliott, Iowa is where I call home. I used to laugh and joke. It had 492 souls, but there were 492 people that could tell my mom what I had done wrong even before I got home from school. We had two churches, we had two different feed stores, four different restaurants, and we had two different hog buying stations because everybody had livestock, and not just pigs. I mean, there was a place to sell the eggs, there was a place to sell the cream, there was a place to trade your animal wares, your animal surpluses. And as the 70s waned on and we heard the get big or get out, we saw the smaller farmers give way to the larger and larger and larger ones, and consequently that made way for the larger and larger feeding operations, whether it was the cattle lots or whether it was the hog lots. And right away, the hog buying stations began to disappear. And the next thing you know, then the feed store began to disappear because there weren't as many hogs that needed feed, or the vet had to go away because there weren't as many people that needed that sort of thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, the farmers that had livestock, that had been viable and had been contributing in a positive way to the communities, were forced to go to town to get a job. And then once they went to town to get a job, there was no reason for them to stay on the land anymore. And then all of a sudden, these beautiful, pristine farmsteads, which had been in families for generations, all of a sudden became vacant building sites that sooner or later were shoved in, pushed in, and forgotten about. To me, the saddest thing, and anybody that lives in Iowa knows this, all you have to do is drive through the countryside and see all these grain bins sitting on the corner of a section just all by themselves, and you have to pause and you have to realize that there once was a vibrant farm there that had a vibrant family there that had a proud heritage and gave a damn about the community, and that's gone.
Yeah, that's really sad. Well, I'm hoping with time, I think the CAFO industry is not sustainable. And it's just a matter of time before that will change and we start to bring this back. And it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of steps to get there. But this is not something that can sustain itself, over time. So thank you for all you're doing to keep that, healthy part of Iowa alive. And thank you for sharing all of this tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to say a thank you to our silver corporate sponsors who also helped to make tonight's meeting possible. Now, these are local and statewide businesses and organizations who value the work that JFAN does. So a very big thank you to Bob Ferguson Wellness, Centered Wealth, Everybody's Whole Foods, Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement, Iowa Farmers Union, the Organic and Non-GMO Report, Soil Technologies Corporation, and the Southeast Iowa Sierra Club. Your support is deeply appreciated. Now I'd like to introduce Tanner Faaborg. Tanner is the founder and manager of 1100 Farm, a 25-acre property in Hamilton County, undergoing a major transition from a CAFO raising hogs for Iowa Select to a sustainable specialty mushroom farm. With its family, Tanner is creating a demonstration hub showcasing innovative approaches to rewilding, conservation, and agricultural diversification. This transformation caught the attention of the New York Times, who published a piece on his family farm in August. And I recommend you read that piece. It's really inspiring. Tanner also serves as board president of Urban Ambassadors, a Des Moines-based nonprofit dedicated to urban sustainability. He has a vibrant background in entrepreneurship, nonprofit leadership, and extensive global travel. He's been to over 90 countries. And this has given him a unique perspective that's driving meaningful change in both rural and urban environments. Tanner, thank you for being with us here tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan. Appreciate it. And great job there, Ron. I appreciate that passion. Love to see it. So I think to let you all know where we got, where we're at now, I got to start at the beginning. So let's go back to the mid 80s. And I had three siblings, and I was living in Nevada, Iowa. I was 3 years old, and my parents were saving up. Their big dream was to live the homesteading lifestyle and move out, buy a farm, and just have, just live that lifestyle. And that's what they did. That's back when farmland was relatively affordable. They found this little acreage, dilapidated buildings and dilapidated house. We moved there. Like I said, there was 4 of us kids, one on the way. I think my parents had about $300, a truck, and that's about it. We didn't have much. But I vividly remember, it was only 3, but I really remember just the excitement of pulling up in the station wagon and getting out. We're all jumping over each other just to get out and just to see the space. There was so much space. Like I said, nobody had lived there for quite a while. It was a fixer-upper for sure, but it was exciting. And we started out that homesteaded lifestyle. So we were really, my dad was a welder, so not making much money. We were under the poverty line for much of my childhood, which I didn't know at the time, and I didn't notice. It's not like that was a big issue at the time. But my mom did make all our clothes. We had a wood burning stove. We'd go around after storms and collect fallen branches and things to heat the house. And we had chickens, and just a kind of diverse farm where we had a large garden. We had orchard, and we just lived off the farm. We would pick apples when they were ready, and pears. We'd make applesauce and pear sauce and apple pear sauce. We do a lot of canning. Pretty much everything we ate, every meal had something from the farm. We had some pigs. We'd have farrow to finish operations. So that was just for us. It was just self-sustaining, basically. And it was great. It was fun. Actually, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed waking up early in the morning and going out and collecting the eggs. I enjoyed all the chores. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed the chores. And then when I was about 9 years old, Wendell Murphy, was moving his operation, his CAFO operation, his hog operation from North Carolina to Iowa, because he saw that there was a lot of feed, a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans. So he thought, well, let's move to Iowa. That's a good opportunity. And we were actually one of the first CAFOs, first barns that they put up. They came to the door and talked to my parents, and it sounded like a pretty sweet deal at the time. Like I said, things were good. It's not like we needed that, but I think my parents were looking towards the future, and I think a big motivating factor for them was the big dream for them was to help send their kids to college. They didn't go to college. They really wanted their kids to get an education. And the way things were going, that just didn't seem feasible. And they also thought, well, maybe someday it'd be nice to retire. So they came in with a deal that sounded nice. It was, my dad was working hard as a welder, not making much money. And they say, well, we'll help you out. We already have these buildings designed. We can get started construction right away. We'll help you out with the loan. Don't worry about that. Work hard for about 10 years, pay off that loan, and then you'll be making, basically they'd be making substantially more money than my dad was making, working 60, 70 hours a week as a welder. So they said, and at this time, there's no other barns like that around. So there's nothing really to compare it to, but it didn't sound too bad. So my parents said, okay, let's do this. And that's how my parents and that's how I became a factory farmer. So I remember we always took a vacation. It was our vacation was we'd go to Pine Lake. So I live in Des Moines, by the way. I live in Des Moines right now, and the farm is just northeast of Des Moines, over by Story City in Hamilton County. And we'd go to this. We'd just tent camp for about a week yearly on our vacation. So they were going to start construction, and so we thought, okay, they're about to start. Let's go on vacation, do a little fishing. We'll come back. And I remember right away, it was different than we anticipated from day one. There's quite a bit of timberland and some trees that, mature trees that we really loved and liked to play around with. And they tore those down. And then I just remember, I don't know, having this thought of, how is this going to be? We really don't know. And the experience was a lot different, I think, than my parents expected. It's a lot of work. It's not just about the work. It's what you have to do. It's the daily routine. It's the working conditions. It's the dust. It's the smell. It's you have 280-pound, 300-pound pigs in confined spaces, and you're loading those out at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's lots of injuries, and it's not something that you can call in sick. It's not the best lifestyle. And back then we had slats in the pens, and the wet manure would go to this down this PVC piping into this lagoon, as they called it, which I think they just named it a lagoon to make it sound more glamorous. But it was just an open pit lagoon for all the waste to go into. And that was one of the first things. You walk from the house. This is a 25-acre farm, so not too big. You'd walk from the house and you'd walk down to do the chores. And I just remembered personally at the time, my beef with it was just it was not fun. I liked doing everything else. It wasn't laziness. I loved baling hay, and I loved all the other chores, but did not like that. And the first thing you see is that lagoon and the manure, and you see that, and then the next change after that is, okay, well, the loan's paid off, like time to start really making this money. And then the contract's coming up, and then they say, well, to extend this contract, you need this new roof, and you need to do this. You need to keep pumping money into this. So it's this treadmill. It's hard to get out of, because once you're committed, you're committed. You put a lot of money into those barns. So you can't just say, well, this isn't really for me. I think I'm just going to stop and do something else. It's really hard to do that. So for a while, I'd say maybe a decade ago or so, my parents they wanted to get out of it. I got out of it by moving away. I graduated high school, graduated from Hubbard Radcliffe, went to the University of Iowa, and college really opened my eyes to a lot of things. One of the things was sustainability and climate change, environmentalism. So I got really into that, became passionate about sustainability, doing some work for PIRG, Public Iowa Research Group, and other organizations, and met a lot of like-minded individuals, and went to those networking events, and really started thinking about that and the impact that we were having on the farm. And then I did have I wanted to explore further. So I did some traveling. After college, I bought a motorcycle and wanted to see my country. So got a motorcycle and a hiking, backpack and tents and everything, and just went camping and couch surfing across the country, kind of around the country for 1 year, and just meeting a lot of new individuals, and just seeing the outdoors and being in the parks, and that really got me thinking too, and just appreciating wildlife more and appreciating nature. And then I came back and I said, oh, well, okay, I need to start making some money. So I started a business, marketing business, did that for a couple years, and then decided it really wasn't for me. I didn't like it. I just felt like you have to do something you're passionate about. I was saving up money to expand, but I woke up one day and, I had this money saved to expand, and I thought, this is just isn't what I want to do. And it's a big world out there. So I left to just not really have any plan. I didn't really have any plan. I just left, started out in Fiji, New Zealand, Australia, and just traveled the world, doing a lot of woofing and couch surfing and staying on other farms and seeing how other governments, municipalities and federal governments and just different people, different farms, how just different ways of doing things. And that further, and during those 3 years and however many countries there was, I really, that passion for sustainability just kept growing. And so then I was coming home, and to be honest, when I left, I thought Iowa was really the last place that I would end up. But I got to think more about it, and I just thought I had I'll be honest, I just had a love-hate relationship with kind of where I came from, with the state, with agriculture. But I thought that there's just such a possibility for change. And I just had been gone for so long. I just really wanted to delve in and really do some hands-on things. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to move to Des Moines and buy a house and work on urban sustainability initiatives. So did that, joined Urban Ambassadors, the board of Urban Ambassadors, a local nonprofit, volunteer-based, and working on some really cool projects and a lot of cool things happening in Des Moines. And we worked on the Des Moines' first climate action and adaptation plan that got passed by city council last year. Now we're in the implementation phase of that. We recently wrote a grant. We got $2.5 million for some tree planting initiatives to improve the urban canopy. We host Green Drinks, which is a networking event with speakers every month, which is, it's just great to get those people together and just brainstorm ideas. But all this time I was doing that, it was in the back of my mind that these CAFOs, these two CAFOs, two hog barns, 1,100 head each, with this open pit lagoon that's being pumped every spring, every fall, being pumped on the surrounding. When you have a pit like that, you don't travel a long ways. You pump it on the surrounding land. So, knowing that was happening was just driving me crazy. So I thought, I was in a unique position where maybe I could do something about that. But I worried about what people would think. I worried about what my family would think, what my parents would think. Would they go for it? I don't know. They're just really not used to change. So I started out with a smaller project. I said, hey, what if we put up this ground mount solar installation, and it could power the farm, and this could be good financially, for you and for the farm. And so that took some convincing, but we did that. And there's a lot of skepticism in the neighborhood with some of the neighbors and farming neighbors and friends and my parents. But then we did it, and then we started getting the data, and then it looked like a 6.5-year payback period. And then those same neighbors that were skeptical, they started driving in and they started asking questions, and they looked at the data, and they weren't laughing anymore. They weren't making fun of me anymore. They started installing their own systems. And that's really, I guess, that was the moment for me that it clicked that, okay, the change is really possible. We could really do this. So, and my parents wanted to get out of farming. They wanted to get out of pig farming anyways. But like I said, they had that investment there. And also, I just, so many things had happened since I left. Hubbard Radcliffe was no more. We lost due to consolidation, just like farm consolidation. there's just population loss in our community and communities, rural communities around Iowa and around the country. And, we lost, Hubbard Reckliffe is no more, so I can't go to those games and don't see your friends as often. And two of the farms surrounding us, the farms that I, grew up with, these people, I love these people, and they had just, commodities and commodity farmers and row crop farmers, and their kids didn't want to do that. And the price of land was so high. So when, the next generation came and inherited that land, it went for sale, and Big Ag came and scooped it up. And I had one just, block away. There's two, there's a CAFO there. There's three hog barns. On the other side, there's turkey barns. And that's happening all over. So part of it, I wanted, and it's an existential problem for us as well. What's going to happen with this farm? We all love this farm, but my parents don't want to do this anymore. They're, if they thought about selling the farm, and all of us kids were like, no, you can't, don't sell the farm. But none of us wanted to do this factory farming with these CAFOs. So I started looking into different business models. I said, what if we could retrofit, you have the infrastructure here. We have a lot going for us. What if we retrofit these barns and found a different business model that was sustainable, that was financially viable, that could produce jobs, that would allow us to keep our farm, and maybe, we could inspire other farms to do the same thing. And kind of a proof of concept that this change, and that this needed change, this need for diversification in the agricultural system, this need for a more localized food system is possible. So it was a challenge. I'll admit it was a challenge. I looked into a lot of things, and I'm thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to fund this? I stumbled upon a nonprofit called Transformation. And they helped me out initially, just brainstorming, and just so I'm not going out alone too, and give me that morale boost. And stumbled upon mushrooms, which I'll be honest, I knew nothing about mushrooms, a few years ago. But really just delved in, just went down the rabbit hole that I'm still in. Love mushrooms, love the versatility of mushrooms, love the medicinal benefits of mushroom, love that you can create value-added products with high margins and make an income that way, and have a longer shelf life, so you could have a more of a national business and ship around the country. But you could also produce just fresh mushrooms, fresh oysters, and sell, like that localized food economy that I'm talking about. And so came up with the business model, saved up some money, found some other funding, and got to the point where I approached my parents and I said, here's my plan. Here's what I want to do. Could I purchase those barns in this section of land, and create this LLC, and you guys could be a part of it? And would you go for it? And they were hesitant at first, for sure. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually they said yes. They said, okay, let's do this. And then at the same time, my older brother, he'd been working for Iowa Select for his whole life. And he was managing about 80,000 pigs, multiple hog sites. Nobody knows pigs. Nobody was deeper into factory farming than my brother. But I convinced him, because of his health problems, so many health problems, so many injuries, so many things happening. I convinced him to quit what he was doing, and he was getting paid pretty well, and quit and join the team. And that's what he did. And then we got to the point where we started on a smaller scale. We started growing mushrooms in tents, kind of in a bubble in our shop that we recently built, and started making tinctures, started making mushroom coffee, selling fresh oysters, experimenting with different recipes, substrate recipes, organic oat straw and soy hulls and alfalfa and all these different additives, different things. trying to do things as sustainable as possible. And then that was enough for, but we about 2 years ago, we ended our contract with Iowa Select. There's no pigs there. We're in construction. We're under construction right now as we're kind of using the funding, using the sales that we make from the mushrooms right now, from the products that we sell right now, that goes directly into finishing, because we still have a bit of a funding gap, but to finish that retrofit of this hog barn. And it's been incredible. It was tough for a while, and then the word got out, and now it's the positive energy, the positive messaging that's been coming is just truly amazing. Like Diane said, we were, just really fortunate to be published in an article in the New York Times and in the Guardian. We're going to be featured in an upcoming Netflix documentary, which is really exciting. We just finished our part of the shoot last week. We're getting just messages, inundated with emails and on social media and just through the website, and with positive messages just saying thank you for what you're doing. And so the plan is, we're going to keep scaling this up, and it's very scalable, and then create these jobs. And then not only that, but then we're doing other conservation efforts and rewilding efforts on the farm to show that you can do a lot with a lot with, not the 25 acres is small, but it's, I guess, small in Iowa farm side, comparison. But prove that we can, you can do something different. It could be sustainable. It could create good, well-paying jobs. It can revitalize rural America. It could bring back that pride that people used to have in what they do. And we can keep these family farms, localize this economy, and stop this consolidation. And so we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. It's a lot of work. It's fun work, though. I'm excited every day. Today I woke up and we're experimenting with these new recipes for mushroom jerky. And it's something that you wake up and it's just a challenge, but it's exciting. It's exciting to do. Having a blast doing it. And I'm having a blast doing it with my family too. And thanks for listening. That's all I get.
Tanner, thank you. That's quite a journey that you've taken to get from where you were as a kid to where you are now. I've had oyster mushrooms, which are wonderful. I've never had mushroom jerky. That would be really cool to try. I wonder if you could take just 1 minute, because I want to get to a couple of more speakers, but I wonder if you could take 1 minute just to share what you told me initially about how you have converted or transformed that manure lagoon into a pond. Because that's pretty cool.
It's really one of my favorite parts of this whole thing, actually, because like I said, I always despised this big, it's about half an acre open pit lagoon with liquid manure there, and obviously that was not needed after the pigs were gone. So I wanted to clean that up and excavate that down. It's got a natural clay base, so excavate that down to the clay base and then alter it a little bit for fish habit and wildlife habitat. And now we've got kind of a filtration system in there, and that's actually the end shoot of the documentary that we're being featured in is me running and jumping into this freshwater pond and swimming around. And I've been testing the water, and it's clean water. And it blows my mind just growing up and seeing that and kind of dreaming about that, like thinking about that, that'd be so cool, but not really ever realistically thinking that could happen. But now it's actually happened, and we're about to stock it with fish, and there's turtles that have made their way there, and frogs and all sorts of wildlife habitat. And It's really, yeah, that part's really exciting. We're also doing a riparian buffer strip along the creek. We just planted about 500 trees. We're doing an oxbow restoration. We did about a pretty large prairie strip. We're making some bat homes. We're doing all sorts of things like that, because a big part of this is advocacy work and creating a demonstration hub, open sourcing this to everyone who wants to see this data. We'll be meticulously collecting this data, sharing it, and hopefully speaking a lot with policymakers. And I've been on the Hill a few times and talking with policymakers on just what we're doing and the need, for change in the agricultural sector. So hopefully once we're really, further along this process, more policymakers will take note of just the possibilities that are out there.
That sounds really cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I would love to see all these lagoons around the state be transformed into swimmable ponds. Wouldn't that be
Yes.
nice?
Yes. You're welcome for a swim anytime. Come on over.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Next speaker I'd like to introduce is one of our board members, one of JFAN's board members, Jocelyn Engman. Jocelyn is a fourth-generation farmer and a co-owner with her husband, Tim, of Pickle Creek Herbs. Jocelyn and Tim spent years building a sustainable produce business on our family's multi-generational family farm. That farm is now surrounded by CAFOs. Jocelyn will take just a couple of minutes to talk about why supporting JFAN is so important for Jefferson County and Iowa.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, everyone. I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I want to thank JFAN for bringing us this wonderful program with these inspiring people who are showing us a viable and sustainable future for our Iowa agriculture. How amazing is that? I personally am very grateful to JFAN and all their tireless hard work in Jefferson County. I'm in the perfect location to see exactly what they do for us. I have a family farm on the county line between Jefferson and Washington counties. If I drive north toward Washington, I see CAFOs in every direction. If I drive south toward Fairfield, I see CAFOs in my rearview mirror. So it's very obvious to me the real and positive impact that JFAN has in our community. And I know too that they have, beyond what I can see, they have a real behind the scenes impact. They give us a strong and tenacious voice against an incredibly powerful industry with endlessly deep pockets. They stand up for you and me, and they make clear what shouldn't have to be said, that we Iowans deserve better than these factory farm CAFOs that lay waste to our land and pollute our water. We deserve clean water. We deserve clean air. We and our families deserve to live in a safe and healthy environment. So if you, like me, are very grateful for JFAN and for all that work that they do for us, and if you believe that we do all deserve a clean, healthy, beautiful place to live, then please join me in donating to JFAN tonight. It's a very simple, easy way to say thank you and for us to show our appreciation. And it's also vital to helping JFAN continue to be a formidable force that protects you, me, and our families here in Jefferson County. Donating is very simple. Just click on the donation link for this meeting or find the JFAN website online at jfaniowa.org. That's jfaniowa.org. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, JFAN. Thank you, all of you, for joining us and for supporting JFAN and for making JFAN possible. Together with JFAN, we can all put CAFOs in our rearview mirror. Thank you.
Jocelyn, thank you so much. I will mention that JFAN is a grassroots funded organization, so your donations do help us to continue to do all this work that's vital for helping to protect Jefferson County, helping to protect Iowa. We work on this local level and the state level, and I thank Jocelyn. I thank you for your really appreciate your comments very much, and I thank everyone for your support that helps us just to continue to do this work. And I also want to thank our bronze sponsors for their support tonight, because they too are local and state businesses and organizations that recognize the importance of the work that JFAN does. And I want to thank American Choice Water, Frontline Print and Web, Green Building Supply, Green Gourmet, Power Chic Cares, Radiant Health Imaging, Sustainable Iowa Land Trust. Each one of these organizations tonight helped to make JFAN's work possible. I thank each and every one of them. They're true friends of JFAN, and I encourage you to support their businesses and organizations as well. I'm going to introduce one more speaker. So back in early August, JFAN had a meeting on the EATS Act, the Ending Agricultural Trade Suppression Act, with Joe Maxwell of Farm Action. And EATS Act, if passed, would harm independent livestock farmers like Tim, Deleana, Curt, and Ron, and all the other farmers around the state like them. This is an important part of the Farm Bill that's still being negotiated. And Shannon with the ASPCA is here tonight to give us a brief update on where the EATS Act stands. Now, Kara is the Director of Farm Animal Welfare Policy for the ASPCA, where she leads the organization's state and federal policy work to end factory farming, reduce farm animal suffering, and support farmers in the transition toward a more humane food system. Kara earned a bachelor's degree in environment and development from McGill University and a JD and certificate in food and agricultural law from Vermont Law School. The ASPCA is a member of the Defeat Eats Coalition that JFAN is also a member of, and that's where I first met Kara. So Kara, thank you for coming tonight and sharing with us the latest on the EATS Act.
Of course. Thank you, Diane. I'm sorry that I get to end our night on kind of some doom and gloom, but I promise that I'm going to end it on a slightly positive note. So if everyone can see my screen, I think you can. I know that all of you have already heard about the EATS Act from Diane, and I know we're also behind on time, so I'm going to kind of go quickly through this. But the key thing to know is that the EATS Act is a piece of federal legislation that is currently being discussed in amongst Farm Bill discussions. And I like to kind of call it the last Hail Mary attempt coming out of Big Ag and Big Pork in particular to try and get rid of state laws like California's Proposition 12, which ban the extreme confinement of farm animals, whether that's in battery cages, gestation crates, or veal crates. We've got, as you can see in this map here, there's 15 states across the country who have passed laws like this, and about half of them have that sales ban component, which is what has angered big pork companies in particular. They really want to maintain the status quo. They don't want to transition to higher welfare systems. And they are challenging these state laws every step of the way. They've taken their fight all the way to the Supreme Court. They litigated against Proposition 12, and thankfully the Supreme Court did rule against them and upheld Proposition 12 as constitutional. And pretty soon after that, we had the EATS Act introduced. So this is their last attempt. This is all they've got, and accordingly, they're throwing everything at it. They're really pushing to get some kind of what they're calling a fix in the final Farm Bill. They walk the halls of Congress and they say that if we allow states to pass laws that protect the welfare of their animals, the health and welfare of the citizens in their state, that there will be chaos in the marketplace, that we will lose farmers, they say, despite consolidation being the number one reason we're losing farmers. They claim that without a fix, the industry is doomed, and it will continue to struggle amidst the chaos of states passing different laws. I think everyone on this call knows that's just not true. In fact, state laws like Proposition 12 provide huge opportunities for farmers like these lovely folks we've heard from tonight who are already raising animals so far beyond the minimal standards that these state laws require. They're simply saying that you cannot keep animals in cages and crates so small that they can't even turn around. So there's already hundreds, if not thousands, of higher welfare farmers all across the country who can immediately sell into these markets, as opposed to, the big pork producers who are absolutely dragging their feet and doing everything they can, again, spending millions and millions of dollars to push back against things that we know consumers and the public want, all these state laws passed with overwhelming majorities. But they really like their profits and they like their status quo. So they're doing everything they can to push against it. So unfortunately, they are gaining some traction. We now have seen, though we don't have a farm bill, it's possible we won't see a farm bill even this year. We may be pushing it all the way until 2025, but we have seen drafts. We've seen a House Farm Bill draft and a frameworks out of the Senate. And unfortunately, there was language that mirrored the EATS Act in both of these versions. They've limited the language a little bit, so the scope is smaller, so it would only impact states' ability to regulate animal products, but obviously the kind of ill intent remains the same. This is a really transparent and dangerous attack on states' rights to regulate products that are coming into their borders. And again, really just a transparent, incredibly transparent attempt at this point on Big Ag's wanting to just maintain the status quo. So it's really important that people in Congress aren't just hearing from those big producers. They're hearing from folks like Niman that have been working really hard and pushing on Congress about what this means for higher welfare farmers and for consumers and again for our shared environment so much about and the need to reform. So if folks haven't already gotten involved through Defeat EATS or haven't reached out to their members of Congress, even though EATS was introduced by an Iowa representative, they still, you should call them and be angry about it. It's still worth it. So I encourage you to do that. And again, we are still fighting back. We'll be bringing some farmers in December. There's a potential that they'll do something that late in the year, but I really encourage everyone to speak out against this because we are in for a fight in the Farm Bill for sure. But I want to go out on a slightly positive note. This is all of the kind of bad things that could happen in the coming Farm Bill, but there is a really exciting good thing that could happen in the Farm Bill, which has to do with a brand new bill that was just introduced literally last week, I believe, on the 25th, if that was last week. It's been a wild time. That would fund farmer transitions like the ones you've heard about tonight. It's called the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act. It would help farmers who are currently raising animals in the confinement CAFO system fund their transitions, which, as we've heard, can be expensive. Whether they want to continue to raise animals, but do so in higher welfare, pasture and outdoor-based systems like Niman, or if they want to get out of the business altogether, like Tanner, and start growing mushrooms, this bill would help them do that. And it's one that we are, again, pushing for in the Farm Bill. So not all doom and gloom. There is still hope. And the fact that a bill like this exists at all is really in part to all the great work of folks like Tanner and of Niman and the farmers we've heard from tonight that are telling their stories. So I'm so glad we're all continuing to hear them.
Thank you, Kara. I've always felt that the EATS Act is like a big temper tantrum that the industry has because they didn't get their way at the Iowa Supreme Court. They're just going to go to any length to try to get it. And, even if you are not a farmer like, the Roselands or Ron, it still can impact everyone because this has the potential to set a precedent about totally negating states' rights down the road for could be anything. And so this is a bigger issue even than the big issue of animal welfare. So I really do encourage everyone, yes, all of our Iowa state legislators are co-sponsors of this bill. That doesn't mean they shouldn't hear from us. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't press them to not pass this bill. And it doesn't mean that the Farm Bill is necessarily going to get passed this year, and we'll have potentially other state, other Iowa, federal legislators that will need to press, to stop it if it goes into next year. So thank you for sharing, the latest on that. Thank you for sharing this new bill that, does offer some, some hope for, this change that we really do need to see. We all need to get behind that as well. So thank you, Kara. Okay, so now I know it's a little later than we had planned, but we still, everyone that wants to stay on, we're going to do some questions and answers. We've got a lot of really good questions from our audience tonight. And I am going to start to go through them. So if we can get everyone back online, because we've got questions from just about everyone here. Okay. Let's see. So I'll try to go through as many as I can. Here's a quick question. What is the time frame from farrow to finish using the Niman method? Who'd like to answer that?
What's the time frame for farrow to finish? You
Yes.
say farrow to finish? I don't know if Ron wants to answer that. He's the one actually doing that currently.
Well, the good rule of thumb is it takes 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days for a pregnant mama to have her babies. And then it takes roughly 195 days after that to get that little guy to harvest. So you do the math on that. What would that be? 10 and a half, 11 months. So, and the misnomer is that you have to have the confinement buildings to get the optimum environment, get the optimum temperature and optimum nutrition and stuff like that. You don't. If that pig's got the outside, he's got sunshine, he's got gobs of fresh air, gobs of good clean bedding, he's going to grow just as fast, if not faster. And I guarantee you that pork is going to taste a whole lot better.
Thank you. I've been wondering how close the premium pork market, or whatever it's called, and their customers is to being saturated. There are a lot of CAFOs, and I'm wondering what % of those farmers interested could reasonably partner with Niman and other similar organizations. And then as part of that question, I want to add, which I saw someone else's comment, is how much of Niman's pork that's produced is sold in the United States versus exported to Mexico, Canada, China, like that.
Well, virtually 100% of the pork that is raised in the United States for Niman stays in the United States for Niman. In terms of a market that's being saturated, niche pork production is growing at an exponential rate. I mean, people are beginning to understand, they care where their meat comes from, they care how the animals are raised that produce their meat. And I compare it like to the craft beer and stuff like that. People all of a sudden realize that if you give a damn, if you care, if you go the extra distance, if you put your extra oomph into the quality and stuff, you're going to get a quality product out. And so far, we have not found a ceiling on the number of people that are willing to buy that or willing to make the jump to support that kind of an enterprise.
Thank you. So we have one question about the fact that Niman is owned by Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
The person writes, the cynic in me worries that Purdue is happy to let Niman do its thing as long as the main business model keeps raking in cash. But the moment Purdue feels like the CAFO model was genuinely threatened, it could pull the plug. Please help ease my mind.
I would be tickled to. Curt or Tim, what do you think? Answer that one, because I know my response is, but they're getting tired of hearing me talk.
I
didn't hear it very good.
I think that I guess that can you repeat that question actually?
Well, honestly, we haven't seen any changes.
Right.
So we're not seeing Purdue push us in any one way or the other. And at our farmer meetings, they very much advocate for us. And I personally think that we're seeing them try to adopt more of our standards. Because like I said, Niman does a great job of trying to marry us with the end user, and the end users are pushing this direction. The customers, the more they learn the stories, the more they meet the Niman farmers, or I'm sure in other companies, they become interested because I just returned from Boston where I got to talk with people at a country club, And they were ecstatic because they hear that their family farmers dying and our country's, spiraling out of control and the rural America is being decimated and all. And so they are excited about it, but then they were asking, well, where do we buy this product? Where do we get this, other than their country club that's offering it now? So I don't see ourselves with Purdue changing models or pushing us. I think they're adopting more of it. I think it will push them more than them push us. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Do you think that Purdue buying Niman has helped Niman to continue to thrive?
I'll jump in on this one, but Purdue bought Niman in 15. And Paul Willis and a lot of you that are familiar with Niman Ranch realize he is hog farmer #1. It was his vision that got Niman Ranch into Iowa pork production. And Paul and I had a long, heartfelt conversation after that acquisition, and we were worried about what was going to happen to Niman Ranch. Because, I mean, we all can paint that negative, oh my gosh, a great big guy gobble up something like this. But as I look back and I reflect on what has happened, if anything, I think that the farmers that sell to Purdue, I mean, the chicken farmers or anything like that, have benefited from what Purdue has learned from Niman Ranch, because Purdue came into this and they wanted to learn why Niman had such a good working relationship with their farmers and why the commitment from Niman and the commitment from their farmers was so special. And what they learned was that the transparency, the openness, the mutual understanding that we both have to succeed and we both have to survive, and then the unwavering commitment both to the quality and the welfare of the animals and the care of the uncompromising steadfastness to our small farms is what makes Niman special, and Purdue picked up on that, and I think they're a better company because of what they've learned from us. But getting back to your question, Niman is a small company, and I don't care who you are, everything happens in jerks. I mean, nobody saw COVID coming. Nobody saw anything like this. The nice thing about having Purdue as an umbrella was we had a security blanket that and it did not, thank goodness, but if money had got tight, we would have had that arm of Purdue to help us. But so far to date, we have not had that. But that's a tremendous amount of comfort in knowing that that's there if it could be needed.
That's good to know. Thank you. So I've got a question here. When a contract grower has a multi-million-dollar loan or loans on their hog barns, how can they get out from underneath, or can they?
I don't know. We didn't get out from underneath anything we owed. We just have made enough.
We never had a contract with anybody else.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
We've always been
Yeah.
independent.
We've always been independent. So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about those contracts.
And you had a contract, Tanner, but you said that your contract ended right around the time that you were getting out, correct?
Yeah, ours was basically up for renewal. So we just, ended that contract. But I think it's less, the hurdle is less about getting out of the contract and more about you have, $500,000 or $1 million or whatever in this asset. If you're going to get out of your contract, what are you going to do with those barns? And how are you going to, what are you going to do? What's next? That transition can be, especially if you want to get out of, I suppose it'd be a bit easier if you want to, do pigs just a different way or independently. But if you want to get out of pigs altogether, then you get into specialty crops, and then it's a lot harder because specialty crops is, then you have to find your markets, you have to sell your product, you have to, do your own marketing. There's so many things involved in it, and there's the knowledge gap, and there's a lot of hurdles there, but also a lot of organizations that are willing to help, and a lot of data and research out there, and but it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cautionary tale for maybe young farmers thinking about CAFOs, that if it doesn't work out, you know, it's not something that's so easy to get out from under.
It's not easy, but it also there's just the upside. There's also, you know, the upside for us is pretty big. We're you know we're talking, you know, we're making 60,000 a year from those barns. Now we're looking at, you know, when we finish construction, we'll be grossing around 3 million a year. So it'll be, you know, and that's just one barn. That's not two. So we'll be, you know, and that's with that's with a lot of job creation. That's with hiring, you know, a dozen full-time jobs and multiple part-time jobs and lots of other, you know, other jobs associated with it. So, and yeah, so there's a lot. It's a risk. It's definitely more risk, but there's a lot better, you know, there's pretty big upside.
Okay, thank you. So here's a question about that lagoon. How is the lagoon wet manure more toxic than dry manure? If it is pumped out onto the fields, isn't it a fertilizer?
The wet manure, yeah, it gets pumped out. And the problem now is there's just such a high density of CAFOs, and all that manure has to go somewhere. So a lot of people are they're using it as free fertilizer basically. So we got put in a bad situation where we had this valuable commodity. Actually, you know, it was worth a lot of money, but we didn't have anywhere to put it. There's nothing else we could do. So we were beholden to big ag around us basically to take that and to spread it around the fields. At first they did it for free. Then they realized, hey, this guy's got no option. So then they started charging. Then we had to pay, you know, $10,000-$15,000 to pump that. But to answer your question, the licks, you know, the liquid manure would go on bare soil basically, and then you get a rain, and then that rainfall washes everything in the water system. That's why you're seeing, you know, this spring we had a lot of rain, we had record rainfall, we had record nitrate levels in the water. So, I mean, the nitrate levels this past spring and summer have been just off the charts. Yeah. And a lot of that is just coming from over manure application, because there's regulations there, but there's really nobody actually checking that out. So I know all the farmers around me put, they put it on there, and that's also an incentive for the CAFOs. I know a lot of people put up the CAFOs just for, they want that manure. You know, they buy the land and they got corn and soybeans and they want that free fertilizer, and there's incentives for new construction on CAFOs, which is nice to see. And that's something that, you know, I've been working on for a while, getting that in the farm bill to have some funding available to retrofit those existing infrastructure. Because a lot of people are out there in the same situation. They have that infrastructure. They just need some assistance retrofitting that.
Yeah, and regarding, you know, putting the manure on the fields, my experience is that, you know, these manure management plans are just that, they're just plans. So when the manure is applied, you really don't know if it's being applied at the rates that they say they're going to apply, and if another CAFO hasn't applied on the same land. I mean, there's like, the DNR has no good oversight of this. It's kind of like a free-for-all. And it's like the public can't even see the manure records, you know, so it's very hard. So you can only catch something as it happens. If there's a spill or runoff or what have you. It's like an after the fact thing, which is not great for water quality by any stretch of the imagination. I have a question here about the EATS Act. So a question is, please list all the things we can do to stop the EATS Act. And I think it's important that we contact not only our representatives, but good to contact representatives from other states too. Kara, can you comment on that? What a good strategy is?
Yeah, and I put this in the chat too for folks to read there, but I think obviously, contacting your own representatives is great, whether that's shooting them an email, calling the local office, if you can get a meeting in person is always great. So that's important. And then in terms of other representatives to be in touch with on the Farm Bill, the Senate is going to be our last line of defense. So we need the folks on the Senate Agriculture Committee to know that this is a priority, that this isn't something that they can compromise with Republicans on. We'll give you the Seats Act if you give us this, extra funding for SNAP or whatever it is that they're all fighting and trying to compromise over. So Senator Stabenow, if you have to pick one, Senator Stabenow is the chair of that Senate Agriculture Committee. So her hearing from you is going to be good. And then another thing that's always really impactful is letters to the editor. We are scanning for where those are published all over the country, and we're sharing them with those offices. So that's always a really great thing to do. And we can help with drafting, I'm sure Diane can as well. I'd say the two big things. And then sharing it, posting about it on social media, if you use it, sharing family and friends. Again, the more people that they hear from, the more they're realizing people care about it. So,
And that's an important point, because one of the things that I've seen is that a lot of people are just not aware of the EATS Act, and even though JFAN we've done a lot of, we've written a number of times about it. We had a letter to the editor when it first was proposed. We did that interview with Joe Maxwell on the EATS Act. And that's all available on our YouTube page. I think we have a link in the chat to that. I think there's a link to some of our action steps or talking points as well. But nonetheless, even though we've done a lot of the people that I talk to that I would imagine would be knowledgeable about it aren't, because it's not a major talking point with, in media or in many places. So, if you do know about it, I really highly recommend you talk about it, and then you also take action. You share it, you take action on it. We have several posts on our website that you can share with people. I'll start re-putting them on Facebook again and boosting them. And this way, let's just try to get it out now that, I think there's more discussion going on around the Farm Bill. Let's start to reactivate that whole awareness around it again. That was a good question. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I think we will wrap it up because it is getting a little bit late now. And there's many more questions I wish I could ask, but let me just go with this last one. I've always loved the idea of transitioning to new models, but a strategist that I really respect told me that CAFOs are ultimately a demand problem more than a supply problem. I think the idea that as long as consumers are looking for as inexpensive of meat as possible, there's always going to be a demand that pushes the system towards CAFOs. How do you see the relationship between changing farming practices and ultimately convincing consumers that they need to change their expectations?
I'm happy to. Oh, go ahead.
No, I guess just from our experience, I think that I don't know that confinements are cheaper for the farmer, for the consumer. I think it gets obfuscated through economics. As we saw on our farm, Dad put up barns 40 years ago. By the time you get the barns paid off, it's time to shove them in a hole and build new ones. Whereas I've got my pigs in a nursery my grandpa built in the 60s or the 50s. So I think longevity wise, this model is the correct model as far as over time it becomes cheaper. One of the first questions was, is our this hog market becoming saturated and with niche hogs? And really that's the goal, is for it to become saturated with niche hogs. And that will then make those niche hogs cheaper and equally priced with commodity hogs, which is our goal as the farmers. We don't want just rich people eating our pork. We want everyone eating our pork.
Well, and in reality, educating, once again, educating your consumers, being out there, sharing our story, sharing other stories of people so that we connect with people who are ordering pork or that are choosing pork. You just got to continue to tell the story and how it benefits the farmer, how it benefits the community. That's just all very important.
That and most people haven't had a pork chop that has an inch of back fat on it. So they probably need to try that first and see how much more pork they'll buy.
You gonna add to that, Kara? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think the narrative that the cheapest meat possible and the way to do it is through these confinement CAFO systems is one that's been pushed by these companies that are profiting the most off of them. This isn't a system that happened because consumers were knocking down their doors saying we want the cheapest pork we can possibly get our hands on. It's, decades of policy that have subsidized corn and soy that have made feeding animals in those CAFOs artificially cheap. Like as we just heard, it's not actually inexpensive. The costs are just being put off in different places. Oh gosh, I just had another point and it left me. But oh no, what was it? It was so good. Yeah, but again, I think it's very much a false narrative, and we know that people want better. The ASPCA talks to millions of consumers through our membership every year, and the system is set up for them, even the ones who intend to do well and intend to be purchasing from what they believe to be independent higher welfare farmers. The way our federal government regulates labels makes it incredibly difficult to do so. Everything is set up to let people kind of trick themselves into buying this factory farm pork because it probably says natural on it. It probably says family farmed, and there's probably an image even maybe of an animal outside. That's not an accident. We've been pushing for decades to regulate labels, and they get lots of emails from big agricultural companies saying, please don't. So yeah, all to say, I just don't, the idea that it's consumer demand that's driving it isn't that. Consumers don't want this. They don't want factory farming, but it's all that's provided to them in the grocery store. And to this, and now I remembered it. I think the other point about, again, inexpensive and what people can afford is also relative to everything else that's going on around us. People have less money to spend on food because the cost of housing is impossible. Medical costs and healthcare, like everything else around it contributes to what people feel they are able to spend on food. So it's not that simple. There's always other things going on that impact that.
Thank you. And I'll just add one thing, that a lot of the costs around CAFOs are externalized. So we as taxpayers are paying, for those subsidies. We as taxpayers, we as residents are paying for the medical care that we're experiencing because we may be breathing in the harmful air that comes from a CAFO. We as taxpayers are paying to clean up our water, that is polluted by a lot of these CAFOs. So they're not paying these costs. The industry is not paying these costs. So we are paying these costs. It's just not in the food. And that balance has to change, probably with some, federal policy changes to really shift the true cost of, food, to shift that around. I think that if that were to happen, then we would see that the meat coming out of CAFOs is not as cheap as it appears to be right now. Okay, I'm sure we could keep talking for a lot longer, but it's gotten late, and I just want to be respectful of everyone's time here. But I really want to thank Tim, Deleana, Curt Roseland, Tana Faaborg for sharing their stories tonight, Ron Mardesen for how Niman Ranch farmers contribute to the economy, Kara Shannon for this important update on the EATS Act. And I really hope that the Roselands and Tanner's stories and experiences will will inspire other farmers, particularly young farmers, to look at these two options as viable paths to take rather than becoming trapped in the CAFO system. And I also encourage you to reach out to your federal legislators, telling them to oppose the EATS Act. Reach out to Debbie Stabenow, Senator Stabenow, tell her to oppose the EATS Act, and also to your state legislators to urge them to support a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to clean water and clean air, because we all deserve that. That's our right. We have an election coming up on November 5th. I urge you to find out where your candidates stand on the factory farming issue and on clean water. And please go to the polls to vote for those candidates whose values align with yours. Early voting begins October 16th. Please vote in this election. And finally, if you like the work JFAN does, I encourage you to make a tax-deductible donation to keep us moving forward, working to protect you from factory farms. I want to thank everyone who joined us on this meeting tonight, our whole audience, our wonderful audience. Thank you for your good questions, and I'm sorry we couldn't answer all of them. Again, I want to thank our generous corporate sponsors, and we're going to end with a PowerPoint set to some music featuring some great photos of animals on independent family farms, and again, some acknowledgement of our corporate sponsors. So if you want to stick around just for a few more minutes to enjoy this, you are more than invited to do that. So thank you all and have a good rest of your evening.